Does anyone know who's running the country right now? Because I can't tell. How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about the disastrous press conference Joe Biden had yesterday after the suicide bombings near the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan, that have taken up to 13 U.S. military members' lives. I believe it's 12 Marines and 1 Navy medic. If I'm wrong about that, if the numbers update, y'all let me know in the comments below. But this press conference was ridiculous from the very start. First of all, it was kind of late for Joe Biden. We all know Joe Biden is like, 78 or 79 years old? But in reality, he's about 178, the way he behaves. 5 p.m., he should be getting ready for bed, okay? He has no business being out there speaking about anything. The so-called press conference was beyond low energy. Remember when Trump would talk about Jeb being low energy? I mean, Jeb is like the Energizer Bunny compared to Joe Biden. He was completely flat, completely low energy, and there's obviously something wrong with him. They want to say, oh, he has a stuttering problem, all this, that, and the third. I mean, come on. That has nothing to do with your energy level, okay? You could stumble over your words while still having high energy. He was totally flat, no energy, and the things that he was saying was just, it was empty. You know, he was trying to be sad, talking about, well, my son died, he was in the military. Well, when you say that, it's kind of misleading, right? His son did die, and I'm not trying to make light of his son's death, but he had cancer, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. But he didn't die in action. He didn't die in combat or anything of the sort. He died well after, and, because of a medical problem, not because he was killed in action, unlike the Marines and Navy medic over there in Afghanistan from the suicide bombing, which is really Joe Biden's fault, because if he would have followed the plan that was already set in motion by Trump, rather than scrapping it and then replacing it with no plan and causing all these civilians and Americans and everybody else to crowd the airport in a desperate attempt to flee, if not for that situation, then it wouldn't have been the prime target of quote unquote ISIS, K, the Taliban, or whoever did the suicide bombing. It wouldn't have been the prime target for them, because it wouldn't have been this massive people all in one place. And it wouldn't have been a situation where everybody's looking at it all around the world. So this, I lay at the feet at Joe Biden. I lay totally at his feet, 1,000%. And there's nobody that can really convince me otherwise. From the beginning, when he was doing the press conference, I'm like, okay, if he doesn't go out there and say, I quit, then I really don't want to hear what he has to say. But I'm going to watch it regardless to see how he does. Is he going to be energetic? Is he going to take questions from the crowd? Is this really going to be a thing that's worth anyone's time to watch? And I guess it was worth your time to watch if you're just interested in seeing how your quote unquote president is doing. If you're interested in seeing how quote unquote leadership is going right now in this country, it told you a whole lot about that. So after the uneventful press conference where he was just talking and, not after the press conference, after his little talk before questions, he began to read from a list like we've always seen him do. And then he said this.
Ladies and gentlemen, he gave me a list here. The first person I was instructed to call on was Kelly O'Donnell of NBC.
Now, that was the most telling part of all. I mean, I was totally floored. I think we all knew that Joe Biden has been getting lists of names and people to call on in order. So, okay, I'm going to call on X, Y, and Z from NPR. I'm going to call on ABC from CBS. He had been doing that. And I think one time there was a picture taken of his little cheat sheet. And we saw him speaking to Vladimir Putin, and he had a cheat sheet of topics to discuss. So we know that he's been getting information sent to him, and his staffers are pretty much running the show when it comes to the press conferences, when it comes to meetings of foreign leaders. We all know that. We know that he's not really leading from the front. He is a figurehead, an empty suit, and really, quite frankly, an empty husk of a man barely alive out there. If he has an HP bar, it's pretty much on 1 out of 100, but that's a different story. Anyway, we know that he's not really leading, but for him to say it, talking about, well, they've instructed me to call on X, Y, and Z. Instructed? You said that on TV? Why would you do that? Because now anybody watching knows that you're not running the show. Those of us that have been paying attention knew that already. But to those who may not really be paying attention, your regular average normie that's not really involved in politics, doesn't even really vote or whatever, international people that may not see you all the time, you said it right there on there. I'm being instructed to call on X, Y, and Z person. Now, the obvious question is, if you're being instructed to call on X, Y, and Z person during a press conference, if you can't even run your own press conference, how you gonna run the country? How are you going to actually run a country? How are you going to develop a plan to get Americans out of Afghanistan who are trapped? Your cabinet, your administration don't even know what's going on among each other. Jen Psaki will say that there's no Americans stranded. Your general saying that there are Americans stranded. Then Jen Psaki will go back and say, well, there are some Americans stranded. Joe Biden will say, well, they instructed me to do X, Y, and Z. Who are the instructors? If your own cabinet are going on television and they'll know what's going on with each other and they're sending mixed messages, are these the same people who are, quote unquote, instructing you to do certain things? How are they going to instruct you if they can't even communicate amongst themselves in a way that sends a cohesive message? This whole thing is a big time dumpster fire. And then I think probably the defining moment beyond they instructed me to do X, Y, and Z. I can't even run a press conference. How am I going to run the country? Beside that was this exchange between him and Peter Doocy.
Mr. President, there had not been a U.S. service member killed in combat in Afghanistan since February of 2020. You set a deadline, you pulled troops out, you sent troops back in, and now 12 Marines are dead. You said the buck stops with you. Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
I bear responsibility for fundamentally all that's happened of late. But here's the deal. You know, I wish you'd one day say these things. You know as well as I do that a former president made a deal with the Taliban that he would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. In return, the commitment was made, and that was a year before. In return, he was given a commitment that the Taliban would continue to attack others, but would not attack any American forces. Remember that? I'm being serious. No, I'm asking you a question. Because before... No, wait a minute. I'm asking you a question. Is that accurate, the best of your knowledge? What?
I don't think that the issue that, do you think that people have an issue with pulling out of Afghanistan or just the way that things have happened?
I think they have an issue that people are likely to get hurt. Some, as we've seen, have gotten killed, and that it is messy.
Now, this was totally crazy. And I'm seeing all types of people try to explain why Joe Biden made this little move right here, this little, cowering in a turtle shell type thing. Oh, he was thinking about his son, how his son died. No, he wasn't. The whole thing about his son and how he died or whatever, that was early on in the press conference. Nothing to do with this. He was just having a back and forth exchange with Peter Doocy and then just kind of retreated into this kind of pseudo fetal position. It was crazy. It was really crazy. It's like, what is going on here? You can't even handle Peter Doocy, a journalist from Fox News. How are you going to handle anybody else? How are you going to handle Xi Jinping? When Xi Jinping's talking to you, he's like, yeah, man, look, if you keep messing around in South China Sea, we're going to do something to you. We're going to invade Taiwan and dare to do something. If he's being talked to that way from Xi Jinping, is he going to do this at that point? What in the world was that? That was crazy. And you know what? This is exactly why they, whoever they are, instruct him to call on certain people. I guarantee you Peter Doocy was not on the list of approved, quote unquote, journalists to call on. Guarantee you. Because at a certain point, I feel like Joe Biden thinks that he wants to be in charge. He wants to be the big guy. He wants to be the top dog. He is not a top dog. He needs to play his position. You know, he got off of that script and start, calling out people like Trump would do. But he can't do that because he can barely answer the questions from people that he is pre-approved to call on, let alone Peter Doocy from Fox News. That whole thing was embarrassing. It was a mess. And it may be a way for, quote unquote, them to get him out of office. I think one way or another, he'll be gone by at least they'll try to drag it out until after the midterms. Then they'll say, oh, well, he wants to go home with his family. He's 80 years old, all this, that, and the third. He most certainly won't run for another term. That's a fact. He's not going to be able to make it really, barely. He'll barely limp his way into midterms, let alone 2024 and beyond. It's not going to happen. But as I close, I want to say this. If they get him out of office right now, before his term is over, it won't make a difference, really, because they're just going to put Kamala Harris in there or whoever they want, and it'd be the same people that are behind the scenes running the show. Just as Joe Biden does not govern, neither will Kamala Harris. These are two morons placed in the position to be figureheads. Their presence in the government is purely symbolic. They're not actually leaders. Those who are behind the scenes are going to be the ones running the show. And that's the scariest part because, as I said, they can't even get out a cohesive message to the public. And they can lie when they talk about things that they say to the regular, everyday normies out there. So if they can't even do that, if they can't even create a unifying lie, how are they going to actually run things in a real way to actually benefit U.S. citizens? They're not going to be able to. Obviously, what we've seen so far in his presidency is evidence of that. But I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? How do you feel about Joe Biden's press conference? Was it a good conference, bad conference? How do you feel about these moments of weakness? Talking about, well, they told me to call on X, Y, and Z and this little turtle shell move. How do you feel about that? Was that a sign of strength? Was it a sign of weakness? You guys know where I stand. This guy and the entire administration, completely embarrassing. And the whole world is looking at this. It's not just, conservatives in America. It's not just guys like me and guys and girls like you. It's not just us. It's everybody looking at this. The whole world is taking notice right now what Joe Biden is doing. And it won't be enough to get him out of office. You got to change the whole administration. You got to, from top to bottom, you got to change it. Midterms, we got some, opportunities, make some things happen there with the House, Senate, whatever. But 2024, we got to make some serious change because what we're seeing right now in the first few months, not even the full year, the presidency will continue to get worse. And term number 2 of the same old nonsense, the same morons who are trying to run the show. But whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.